Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
And if you are listening to our voices right now, there is no doubt that you have already heard something about last night's debate.
Or maybe even watched it yourself.
But what if you didn't watch it, right? You're just hearing or reading about the headlines.
Harris wins big, or hearing something about dogs being eaten in Ohio.
Yeah, let's understand that eating dogs is not a thing in Ohio. Words I did not know I would actually say. Well, Yahya Reyes is Michigan Public's data reporter. He is with us now. Hey.
Hey there.
Okay, you didn't watch last night's debate.
No, I did not. I was busy moving.
Good excuse. Did you at least have pizza or something?
No, I didn't. I didn't have pizza. I had some ramen that I warmed up.
Okay. That's kind of debate watching food.
Yeah, it's kind of debate watching food.
If you had.
Instant ramen, not the good stuff.
Adam, so you and I were here at the station early this morning, and you were asking, so what happened? What did I miss? And I started to answer, and I was like, wait, Adam, come on the show today, and you're going to ask your questions about the debate as totally someone with completely fresh eyes.
Yeah, I made sure to avoid reading anything about it because I knew you were going to be doing this.
Did you really?
I did, yeah. So I wanted to make sure I came into this as unknowledgeable as I possibly can.
Like you did your homework by not doing any homework.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay, so what you got for us?
What's this about dogs? What happened? What?
There was I think it started actually with the Republican vice presidential nominee.
J.D. Vance.
He said something about parts of the country where immigrants are eating dogs. Mm-hmm. Not true. Mm-hmm. And then at the debate, Donald Trump reiterated that. And so that suddenly became one of the talking points of the debate and maybe the weirdest one.
And really what we should dig into, Adam, is, a lot of folks are just basically calling this a dog whistle, that a lot of folks were saying, Trump, he should keep talking about the economy, inflation, things that Kamala Harris has a tougher record. And yet within 27 minutes, she goaded him about his rally size. And this is when he starts talking about this.
And that's really where he went off message.
And we should say the moderators kept them on task. There were questions then about abortion, Afghanistan withdrawal, Gaza. But really, it just kept coming back to what felt like these really far right-wing statements.
It's not unusual in debates for candidates to blow past the questions that the moderators ask, but even Trump's people were saying he veered off any talking points to just extemporize and riff, and it really didn't work for him.
Going into debates, there's always a lot of, discussion. What is the candidate supposed to do? How are they supposed to perform in order to get what they need to get? How did they perform? Did they do what they needed to do?
I think Donald Trump's team was like, again, you need to come in, you need to talk about inflation and maybe immigration. Again, Donald Trump really trying to tie immigration into crime and this sort of dark idea about how the United States is. And what you saw is two very different pictures of the United States, whereas Kamala Harris sort of came off as the happy warrior, something she really has since July, this optimistic tone about what the future of the country could look like. Both candidates, I think, had to come in and talk to their base. Both candidates did that. The next needed to persuade persuadables. And I think Kamala Harris likely did that. People looking at her for the first time, people who watched the debate, Adam, going, okay, I could see her as commander in chief. I don't know that persuadables saw Donald Trump last night and were like, oh, yeah, this feels really solid. But this is what, we're going to have to wait and talk to voters about over the next week.
Kamala Harris did what she was supposed to do. I know that there are people who are quibbling about how good she was, but she was supposed to basically make people give her another look after becoming the nominee. And we know that at least when Biden was on the ballot, that before the last debate, he had kind of room to grow, but people weren't sure about Joe Biden. Maybe they were going to vote for Biden, maybe they were going to vote for Trump, or maybe they were not going to vote, which I think is
double haters.
Yeah, which is one of the big fears on the Democratic side. Well, Kamala Harris, at the very least, gave people a reason to give her another look. And Donald Trump just kind of played to his base and the people who he's already got, which as near as we can tell, is not yet at 50%.
I mean, like you both sort of talked about this, and I know we're going to have to hear from voters to kind of get the sense, but like, how much do debates like this matter, right? Like, I care about them because I'm a journalist.
Yeah.
My wife is a healthcare worker. She could not care less. Like, if I was going to watch the debate last night, I would have watched it alone. Like,
With ramen.
with ramen. How much does this matter to the average person?
That is such a good question. And it's also a really good forward promote because in a couple minutes, I actually had a conversation with a professor, believe it or not, who has done research that actually shows debates don't really impact voters' minds that much.
To me, what is, I think, kind of axiomatic about debates, although I think that last night's debate was an exception, is that candidates don't so much win debates as they either survive them or they lose them.
Like with Biden in his last debate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, do you feel somewhat up to date now?
I think so. It sounds like an hour of chaos. I'll go watch some clips and learn more
90
about this.
minutes, dude. You got 90
90 minutes
minutes
of chaos. But
historic chaos.
Historic chaos.
Nonetheless. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So the question, how much do these moments really mean in the long run? Do they really impact and change the minds of voters? Well, actually, some research says no, not really. Caroline Lepenec is assistant professor of economics at HEC Montreal. I spoke with her earlier today. Hi, Professor.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you analyzed, along with your co-researcher at Harvard, surveys from before and after more than 50 debates in 7 different countries. What did you find?
Yes, exactly. So we analyzed these voter surveys. Our first finding is that a lot of voters decide whom to vote for during the campaign season. So we may expect TV debates to be very impactful because those are campaign events during which candidates provide a lot of information on themselves, their different qualities, their personalities, and their policy proposals. So we were very surprised to find that debates actually have no significant effect on voters' decision-making process. So they don't help voters come up with their final voting choice.
And why is that?
So a plausible explanation is that all the countries we study are established democracies that are where there is already a lot of information on the different political parties and the candidates. And debates tend to happen pretty late in the campaign season. So it could be that voters have already received a lot of information and debates do not provide anything new, really.
Interesting. So because debates tend to happen so late in the campaign season, what you're saying is that folks have already heard everything that there is to hear about the candidates. I was really intrigued, though, too, by your research that found that the outcomes, again, that debates don't meaningfully impact voters that much in their decision-making process, was the same across the 7 countries you studied. One could be forgiven for thinking because the U.S. is so politically polarized right now, and because we have essentially a 2-party system, that it would make sense that it was harder for someone to suddenly just decide to switch parties after a debate. But you found that in countries that have less political polarization and even had more than 2 political parties, that voters still did not really change their minds after a debate.
Yes, absolutely. So in other countries, which are more like a multi-party systems, it is more common for voters to switch between one party to the next. But even in those settings, we find that debates have no effect on voters' decisions.
So if debates don't affect the outcome, what does?
So we believe that's more of an hypothesis, but based on our analysis, we believe that the continuous flow of information that voters receive during the campaign could be more impactful, and that's both information that you receive from watching the news, from any type of media, but that's also the information you get from more like conversations with your friends and families, their colleagues, their neighbors, etc., and that could potentially have a larger effect than just a one-time event like a TV debate. And there is other research besides my own that has found that what really works the best is direct contact. So door-to-door canvassing, for instance, has been found to be extremely efficient at persuading voters to go vote.
So I guess the question then, of course, ends up being, why have debates?
Yeah, that's a good question. Based on our results, we may come to the conclusion that debates are just a waste of energy, a waste of resources, a waste of money. I would give like a bit more nuance to that conclusion. I think debates also have a symbolic role. Think of democracy as a system in which ideas can be confronted, where we can debate until we reach a consensus. Debates play a role, maybe not in terms of providing information to the voters and helping them decide who is the best candidate for them, but to keep the democratic life alive.
Carolyn Lepenec is Assistant Professor of Economics at HEC Montreal. Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So interesting. But Rick, I know exactly what you're going to ask because I'm thinking the exact same thing.
What about the Biden debate?
Exactly. We had this debate in June that actually had this dramatic effect on the outcome of this election. So yes, of course, I asked the professor about that, and she said absolutely that is an outlier and that she'd actually be really interested in studying the effects just this year alone. But, she noted, you remember that she said one of the reasons her research shows debates don't affect voters' minds that much is because they come so late in the cycle. Well, she noted that the June debate with Biden and Trump, it was really an anomaly because it was one of the earliest presidential debates in modern history.
Right.
But again, something she wants to learn more about.
And we should also mention the fact that this debate, like this election, is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
People were still using the debate to learn more about Kamala Harris. So again, this is different than what the professor's research includes, which is that campaigns are long, and by now folks have usually come up with an opinion. And more importantly, we should note that even if this debate affected even just the smallest number of voters, we know that, well, in Michigan and across the country right now, it appears that this election is very, very, very close. So even if a debate changes just a few minds, well, that could be a game changer.
Yeah, we keep saying this election is going to be won on the inches, not yards. And it's just more for researchers and political scientists to study, I guess, after this election year. After the debate last night, both candidates, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, were in New York today. They were at Ground Zero in Manhattan for a commemoration of September 11th. And Rick, a decade ago, you originally brought us the story of how it was that the state of Michigan, its taxpayers, came to own the original architectural drawings of the World Trade Center.
Before the World Trade Center was an unmistakable presence on the New York skyline, before the towers became an unforgettable absence, the buildings were a vision in the mind of an architect. The buildings were designed by Minoru Yamasaki. His firm designed the entire complex, not just the Twin Towers, but also the Customs House and other surrounding structures. The working designs are kept here in the archives of the state of Michigan. That's right, the designs for the World Trade Center reside in Lansing, almost 700 miles from Manhattan.
You can see here's the World Trade Center, and they have all their different when they needed to make notations on them, they would make notations and stamp it and date it.
Mark Harvey runs his finger along one of the blue lines that make up the architect's designs of the World Trade Center. Harvey is the official archivist of the state of Michigan. He's showing me one of several large books that hold the designs. Harvey says what makes these drawings significant is they're the working designs, the World Trade Center as it was built, with the corrections and adjustments that were made along the way. Those books that contain the drawings are part of the archives collection of Yamasaki's work, rescued from the Yamasaki offices in Troy. That was in 2010, 24 years after Yamasaki had died and his namesake firm was going bankrupt.
Architects a lot of times sort of laugh at historians and archivists when we get excited about these types of materials because they just see them as a tool. To them, the exciting part is the actual building. This is just the means to get there, so they're always curious as to why we're interested in them. In this particular instance, it's interesting because the buildings are no longer there.
How the state of Michigan came to own the design is a bit of a cloak and dagger tale, as it's told by Mark Harvey. Harvey says he got a phone call back in 2010 that the Yamasaki offices were about to be cleared out and much of the material auctioned off by Oakland County to pay for back taxes. But a lot of it was going to be shredded and tossed in the trash. Harvey says he went to work and started making phone calls.
We did get a call back from the county treasurer saying, you can go in, but we have to get ready for an auction on Wednesday morning. So you have between 8 a.m. and noon on Tuesday, which was the following day, to get whatever you can.
Harvey pulled together a crew to be waiting at the door the following morning. But first, Harvey had to resolve another issue, getting clear ownership of whatever they could pull out of the Yamasaki offices. The county had a lock on the door, but there were no court rulings or anything like that clearly establishing that the Yamasaki firm no longer owned them.
The CEO of Yamasaki at that time, as far as we knew, was a fugitive because of the tax evasion. So we did have a phone number from him. He was concerned about preserving the record. So he set it up that we'd meet in the parking lot of the Starbucks down the street from the building the next morning. So I arrived at 7:30. A black Lexus pulled in next to me, and the window rolled down, and he waved me in. So I got out of my car and walked over and sat in the seat. It's as clandestine as it sounds, actually.
Harvey says they talked for about 20 minutes. The CEO signed the release, and Harvey and his crew went to work. He says they worked as quickly as they could over the next 4 hours. Papers were flying, file cabinets banged against walls in the rush to get them into the moving van.
And the shredders moved in right behind us with their dumpsters.
When noon came, that wasn't the end of it.
My sense that day was, in talking to the former CEO, that everything wasn't there, and he had hinted along the way that there was other stuff that he was holding back. So at about noon, I got a phone call from him that day. We were clearing out the office, and he said, well, there was one other place, and to meet us at this storage facility in Troy. And that's where the World Trade Center drawings were. He had hid them in a storage unit because there was still lingering litigation from the 9/11 disaster. So he had hidden those drawings in the storage facility.
The value of these drawings is just enormous.
Pauline Saliga is with the Society for Architectural Historians in Chicago. She made that initial phone call to Mark Harvey, warning him that the Yamasaki records were in danger of being lost forever unless he did something. So back at the storage garage, here's mild-mannered scholar Mark Harvey being handed in spy caper fashion these designs for the World Trade Center, pulled from their hiding place.
It was a mixture of excitement and overwhelming sense of responsibility. Maybe a little pressure mixed in there. Like we weren't expecting to be handed these materials, and now here they are, and that's great. But now we have an incredible responsibility to preserve them, make them accessible, and deal with the iconic nature of not only the building but of the tragedy that followed.
Mark Harvey says every few months after the Yamasaki offices were cleared out, he would get a phone call from the CEO.
And he'll say, well, I have more stuff, and I'm going to drop it at, it's always a different, I have more photos. So I think we're done now. It's been a year since I've heard from him. I think we're done.
But you don't know for sure.
I don't know for sure. He could call me. I don't know.
And I talked to Mark Harvey again yesterday, and he says the drawings are still at the Michigan Archive, and people can come in and ask to see them.
Yeah, we're going to link to the story on the website. You can actually see some of the drawings there at michiganpublic.org. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I am Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.